With the NFL draft less than a month away, it's become clear as day as to who will be the next #1 overall pick, with sources around the league reporting that the cost of trading up to the first pick in this year's draft have increased tenfold after the Tennessee Titans saw the former Miami quarterback work out at his pro day on Monday. In fact, the Titans loved Cam Ward's pro day so much that they requested an additional private workout and throwing session with the Miami QB. And while the Titans have played hardball throughout this entire process and hinted multiple times that they were willing to trade away this pick, it's obvious now more than ever that the Titans are going to be using that first overall pick, and they will be drafting a quarterback with it because they have been searching for a franchise QB for years and are finally in a position to select one of their own. And it's not like Cam Ward is shy about his feelings towards potentially getting drafted by the Tennessee Titans, because after his pro day, he had a lot to say. He came out and told the media, "I'm solidifying it today. They finally got to see me throw in person. That should be all they need to see." Cam Ward cares more about getting drafted with the first overall pick than he does about going to a shitty franchise. And that all comes down to the competitive nature that fuels him, which is just another thing that these teams love to see out of a potential prospect, let alone possibly their next franchise QB. And it also helps that he had a phenomenal senior season at Miami where he took the college world by storm. Sure, you may have heard his name while he was playing at Washington State, but even he himself would tell you that the media coverage more than doubled the moment he walked through Miami's doors for the first time. And no shade at the Pac-12, or at least what used to be the Pac-12, but he was moving to a slightly more prestigious conference in the ACC. And in his 13 games with Miami, they ended up winning 10 of them. He had a 67.2 completion percentage, career high, threw for 4,313 passing yards, averaged about 9.5 yards per attempt, found the end zone through the air 39 times, because that's how many passing touchdowns he had 7 interceptions, and a QB rating of 172.2, another career high. He also had an extra 200 yards and 4 touchdowns when it came to the run game, because this cat was mobile as hell. Just another one of Cam Ward's many attributes. And in his one season at Miami, he got those boys off to a hot start. You couldn't write a better script. They began the season 9-0, 5-0 in conference, and were beating just about any ACC team they went up against. Virginia Tech, Berkeley, Louisville, Florida State, Duke, they handed them an L back-to-back weeks. It was nonstop success for Miami, a program which didn't have a double-digit win season since 2017. And I'd argue that this is the first season that Miami has been successful under their newer head coach in Mario Cristobal, because this was the 3rd season that Mario was the head coach of the Miami Hurricanes. And, while they did make a bowl game last year, they only won 7 games. And this time they went back to the bowl game, and they probably would have won it if Cam Ward had played the whole time. But again, he's looking towards his future with the Tennessee Titans. Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the handful of losses that Miami suffered towards the end of the season with Cam Ward under center. Because if you're wondering how a team could start off the year 9-0 and end up missing the college football playoffs under a 12-team format, it's because they got absolutely crushed in the games that matter. It also didn't help that Miami had a very weak schedule, and the only good teams, the only competent teams they had to play, ended up handing them losses. Not a single soul was fighting for the Hurricanes or for Cam Ward to be in the college football playoffs, because they proved at the end of the season that they didn't deserve to be there. And I'll talk more about the Hurricanes' losses in a second. But for right now, I wanted to remind you guys to slow down, like the video, and subscribe to the channel. We're on the road to 10,000, and every subscription is greatly appreciated, so please subscribe. But again, let's get to the Miami Hurricanes' first loss, which was handed to them by Georgia Tech. And nobody saw this upset coming. It wasn't seen from even an inch away, because the Hurricanes were heavy favorites in this game. And by no means was this the fault of Cam Ward. In fact, I'd argue that Cam Ward's had some of his best games during their losses. He ended up throwing for 348 passing yards on 25 completions on 39 attempts and had 3 passing touchdowns. He did his part. But the reason that the Hurricanes fell short was because they couldn't stop a thing defensively. And this is a pattern that you'll see for the rest of their losses. Now, what Georgia Tech did best was run the ball. They ended up having 271 rushing yards, the most amount of rushing yards that the Hurricanes have allowed in a single game since 2020. That is where they dominated. And it also didn't help the Hurricanes that they were constantly getting stopped on 3rd and 4th downs, which is another big part as to why the Yellow Jackets were able to beat them 28-23. And only a few weeks later, they would have the biggest game of their season against Syracuse, who was also a top school in the ACC. And in this game, well, Cam Ward had a near identical stat line to the last because, again, he threw for 349 passing yards, one more than previous, and had 25 completions on 36 attempts with 2 touchdowns in the air. This was by no fault because of Cam Ward. In fact, Cam Ward helped the Hurricanes get off to a 21-0 lead. However, because of 2 back-to-back scores in the second quarter, Syracuse was able to rally back into this game. And before they knew it, the game was tied 21-21. Now, the biggest weakness the Hurricanes had in this game was their defense, because their defense couldn't stop a lick of anything, whether it be in the second quarter or after that, because Syracuse ended up finishing with 42 points, while Miami only scored 38. And the only reason the Hurricanes were still in it at the very end was because Cam Ward was fighting for his life. This is a consistent theme we saw throughout the entirety of the regular season. One where the Miami Hurricanes defense ended up struggling and Cam Ward had to overcompensate, which led to many mistakes, but for the most part ended up working out, especially early on. Cam Ward would put this team on his back and led them to victory after victory. However, he wasn't able to do that for the entirety of the season, which is why they saw plenty more losses. Now, the third loss was in the Pop-Tart Bowl, but we won't really count that because, again, Cam Ward only played in half of that game, and in the half that he did play, it looked like Miami was going to run away with it. But of course, he needed to prioritize his future and didn't want his NFL career to end before it began because he got injured at the end of a meaningless game. And let's be honest, all of the bowl games outside of the college football playoffs are now pretty much meaningless, which is what was happening here. And in this game against Iowa State, he did leave them with a lead. They just weren't able to hold on to it because Cam Ward is this entire team. And after this game, there were media narratives being spun that he isn't a team player, that he quits on his teammates. Of course, I think that was just to get his draft stock to fall a bit so other teams would have the potential to draft him. But that isn't going to work because, like I mentioned, Tennessee will be selecting Cam Ward with the first overall pick. I can guarantee you that. He will be a Titan before the end of April. And if he isn't, the Tennessee Titans are the most moronic franchise, the most moronic organization in the NFL. It is clear who they need to draft here. It's obvious to me, it's obvious to you. Who else needs to spell it out for the Titans? I don't know. But what I will tell you is Cam Ward is the best quarterback in this year's draft. But anyway, I think I've said everything I've wanted to about Cam Ward and about the Tennessee Titans. So I'm going to call it here. Catch y'all later. Much love. Deuces. In love with the money, I never letting go. I get high with my baby.